Hey there, and welcome to another episode of Tourism Marketing Mastery. I'm your host, Erik Hatterscheidt, and today I've got a guest on the show. His name is Casey Halloran, and he is the co-founder of Namu Travel Group, which is down in Central America. They specialize in Central American travel. And the reason that I brought Casey onto the show today is we got connected. Casey did find me through the podcast, but what I found really fascinating about Casey in a previous conversation that we had is his use of marketing practices that I haven't seen widespread in the tourism industry, and they're marketing practices that I've talked about on the podcast. And I would really love to just have a bit of a chat with Casey around how he uses some of the marketing that we're talking about, in some cases direct response, and then in a lot of areas we're just talking about just being a little bit more innovative than a lot of the other tourism operators that are out there. So I'm pretty stoked to have him on the show. Welcome, Casey.
Thanks for having me.
So how you doing today, man?
Good, man. So it's a cloudy Friday in San Jose, Costa Rica, but
Yeah,
things in virus news seem to be improving. So
yeah.
as
Around the
we're-
board, they're slowly
Yeah.
warming up. So I mean, the virus and the weather, that helps too. So
Good.
yeah.
But yeah, things are good. Marketing metrics seem to be improving a little bit. All the early indicators we look at are improving, and hopefully now consumer sentiment and traveler sentiment improves. What we don't know in our part of the world yet is when are we allowed to open? So
I think that's the
huge
big
uncertainty.
question. Yeah,
It's huge.
yeah, that's the big question. Is what's going to happen here? So, Casey, I'd like to get a little bit into just a little bit of your background
Sure.
before we roll into some more current questions. But I want to hold on to that thought about, when are we going to be opening and what are we doing in the meantime as far as marketing goes? I think we'll just bat a few ideas back and forth, what we're doing, what you guys are doing, just seeing how you're addressing the situation to the best of your ability. But let me take it back first. So tell me a little bit about how you got into the hospitality industry.
I'm an internet marketer and really a marketer at heart. My parents both own small businesses. Maybe it's relevant, but I'm from a tiny town in rural Pennsylvania, which is heavily dependent on tourism, nature, wildlife, hunting, and fishing. So I grew up in small business. I grew up in merchandising and marketing and seeing what tourists look like. But when I was in university, I studied marketing and business, and I just have always loved the combination of the written and spoken word in advertising and marketing. And I think what really suits me is marketing is a little bit left brain, right brain, and I happen to be left-handed. And I just have always enjoyed writing copy, writing direct response. My first job in university, and really the only adult job I ever had, was working for a small internet startup in 1997 that was selling online software. And I was building their first web page, writing their ad copy. And a lot of that was direct response letter writing. So we had a database that I was hand typing into Microsoft Access, and we were writing direct response letters. And so I was reading the Gary Halbert stuff and the Dan Kennedy stuff way back in the late 90s. And my mother was an English teacher. I was having her read my direct response letters. And I just,
You probably hated that.
Yeah, and I enjoyed it,
Yeah.
And so maybe 12 months into my adult working career, I was such a misfit that I never really felt good in interviews with any of the big companies hiring where I was in Virginia. I could have been writing direct response letters for Capital One trying to sell credit cards to the masses. And I just somewhere got it in my mind that I needed to move abroad. I'd gone to university with a bunch of Panamanian students who had studied abroad in San Sebastian, Spain. And I just had this impulse to move abroad. And on the internet back then, this is early days, Lycos and Northern Lights and other search engines have long since passed. Costa Rica just had way more information, way more small websites than every other place that I was researching. And I packed up and moved. My parents had sold their businesses and they wanted to semi-retire somewhere. And so I did a year with my parents and my 15-year-old sister at the time, sort of the Swiss Family Robinson thing, of all of us living in San Jose, Costa Rica. And I started a little internet website, a directory selling ads. And the people that I just really hit it off with were the hoteliers.
Mm-hmm.
And somewhere in there, I started basically like a blog, a newsletter, hyping these properties. And I would just go and visit them. And I thought it was so much fun. My family returned to Pennsylvania. I moved across town to a cheaper part of the city, put an ad in the newspaper for a roommate, and that guy became my 20-year business partner. And at some point, we're just like, let's start an online agency. There really wasn't a term OTA at the time. There wasn't a whole lot of that activity yet. But we built a boutique agency, and it just went way better than planned.
That's really fascinating. I'm gonna go back. I held on to one of these questions as you were telling your story there. You talked about how you were doing direct response marketing way back in the day, and your mom was an English teacher, and you got her to take a look at some of those letters. What I'm interested in is, were there points where your mom was trying to correct some of your direct response because it didn't hit some of the English grammatical rules, but it hit direct response rules?
Yeah, I'm a gigantic believer in writing the way you speak.
Mm-hmm.
I think the most powerful language is common language. I've always been a much bigger believer in Hemingway than, I don't know, some of your longer-winded authors.
Yeah.
Great writing isn't great editing. And the beautiful part, particularly about internet marketing, and why I really, it just stuck with me, is the ability to test your art with metrics and get. Just a couple days ago, we were building some pages in Unbounce. We were just building some quick landing pages to test a quick idea and A/B test something. And there's nothing more thrilling to me than throwing an idea out there and seeing what works. And whether that's Google AdWords or an Unbounce page, 20 odd years of doing this, it's still thrilling to me.
Yeah.
To the not knowing and seeing if putting Vominos in the call to action button might do better than let's get this coconut rolling.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just having a little bit of fun with it.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that you're touching on that personality in the writing as well, because that's something we really strive for at a micro level. We're doing that with the resort. We try and put that into some of our copy, both in social media, but on the forms as well. Like even in our application form, there's things in there. One of the funnest things I've played with, and this is just for anybody listening, if you're a resort or a tourism business and you have an application form or an inquiry form, in the form itself, we just put a space for questions or comments. I mean, that's pretty normal, right? But then in brackets, we put the funnier responses will be given priority. And it's fun because every day I'm reading people's jokes as they're coming in. Like it's
brilliant.
It's
brilliant.
But it sets, what it does more than just entertaining for us is it sets the tone for the guest as to what kind of experience they're going to be getting when they come. And there's a lot of small things before that. That's not the only thing, but
I think that's brilliant. And what I've never quite understood is why everyone's so afraid to be a little bit different.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a huge fan of comedy, and I think the first rule of comedy is surprise.
Yeah.
And that's why it's tragic when your favorite comedy shows all the good stuff in the trailer, because now it's not surprising, And my mind is blown at how, particularly when we talk about luxury or higher end things, how everybody seems to huddle around the same campfire, and everything becomes corporate gobbledygook and just boring. Mm-hmm. And if there's any space where there's just no room for that, in my opinion, it's travel. Travel's exploration, excitement, and surprise. So why would you have your website look identical to everyone else's or have all the buttons say submit?
Yeah.
But for some reason, you pay high dollar consultants or an expensive ad agency, and at some point people are afraid of being wrong.
That's the thing that you see in any industry at the high level, and I'm sure you're familiar with that, is that oftentimes industries, they're paying to mitigate their losses and not looking to necessarily look for increased gains. Often
you're not going to get
that's what it is. Yeah.
You're not going to get a 10x change without a 10x bold move. And I don't know if you've ever followed the website Conversion Rate Experts. They're in England. It's a
No,
great website. I think
no,
you'd really enjoy it.
wasn't even
And
familiar with
it's like if you want big impact, you got to make big changes. If
it.
you want to really dramatically see something happen, good or bad, you've got to be willing to change the navigation of your website, change your homepage message, change the giant image on the homepage, change your conversion funnel, change the form. You got to be willing to try stuff. And the older and more brittle a business gets, where you're now shooting for 1% growth, you just hear everybody. The DNA of the business eventually just fights against change. And the sad part for any entrepreneur, any startup, or any small businesses, that's how we all got there, was by taking risks, A/B testing the crap out of stuff. Sometimes just AA testing, taking a big move.
Yeah.
And little by little, that risk taking gets frittered away.
Why don't we, Casey, I want to pause for a second, because I'm guessing, based on the conversations I've had with listeners of this podcast, most of them have no clue what we're talking about. When we talk about, even if we talk about direct response or A/B testing or split testing, maybe it's important that we define a couple of those terms, just so that you're not totally, or listeners aren't totally lost in this podcast. So I do think it's imperative, though, that they understand how important those tools are to us as marketers in making sure that we're constantly improving, because that's really what it comes down to, is saying, hey, how do we measure constant improvement in our marketing?
I mean, otherwise it's all just opinions, right? And then usually the highest paid person or the creative person or whomever you've hired, they just get away with their opinion. I'm a big believer in prove it.
Yeah.
I think that I've spent so much money on AdWords. I think it'd blow your mind if I told you how much over 20 years. And the beauty of it is, all I've learned from it is the ads that I wrote that I thought would work don't work.
Yeah, that's huge. That's so good. That's so good to hear from you, because I'm in the same boat. People come to me, pay me big money for marketing advice, and I'm like, I'm not gonna tell you which ad here is gonna work, because that would demean that I actually know what I'm doing. If I told you, that would inherently be a lie, because I've been proven wrong myself, doing my very best job so many times where, I'll create an ad that I think is brilliant, and then I'll create a few ads to split test against it, and it's some bullshit piece I put together in 5 seconds that far outperforms the thing that I spent an hour on.
I can't remember who it was. Somebody said, if you're a music person, if you're an artist, your worst song will become your first hit. The one you absolutely hate, and it's going to haunt you the rest of your life. And why do people like that one? Yeah. And I think writing ad copy, modifying websites, I'm telling you, I've spent so much money on this stuff to know I don't know nothing. Yeah. You need to let the consumer decide. Yeah. You need to have a general direction of the voice you think you want to have, the level of whimsy, all that sort of stuff, your general value proposition, what you believe makes you different. Yeah. If you don't know that stuff, you're lost. But the best innovation I've seen come out of Google AdWords in a long time are these dynamic ads, where you write 10 headlines, you write 10, and it mixes and matches until it finds you the winner. So just say it's gobs and gobs of time. Yeah. But you have to be willing to stretch the edges a little bit on your creativity of saying, all right, let's see what would happen if I said something a little bit nutty. Yeah. Or what if this thing that we absolutely have been saying that for 35 years, we have to keep saying it. Well, what if you did it once, Yeah. And if that's the beauty of A/B testing, is you're putting up multiple variants of anything, whether it's a landing page or a website or the ad copy, and you let Karate Kid style, you let them battle it out. Yeah. And survival of the fittest, your stuff evolves. If you're not running those kind of things all the time, it's very hard to evolve. So
I'm gonna pause for a sec, just because I don't think we have clearly defined exactly what we're talking about. I think people, if they're listening and they don't know, they're probably starting to glean a few things, but let's define a few terms. So first of all, direct response. How would you define a direct response, Casey?
Oh, I mean, if I'm sending out outbound emails, if I'm sending out outbound physical mailer, if I am even sending out a paid advertisement on social media, a boosted post, I'm shooting for a direct response on that piece, meaning I'm not branding, whatever that means. I'm not Coca-Cola putting up a bunch of billboards to increase brand awareness. I am shooting for the client to do something. That might be fill out a form for later, might be sign up for a newsletter, maybe make a phone call, but it's something that's trackable so that I can say this copy or this effort did better than the other one. So there's a specific metric or a goal tied to that thing. I'm trying to get somebody to do something.
Yeah, absolutely. So good definition there. And let's cover A/B testing, split testing, which we're going to say are the same thing, just different terms for the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, the beautiful thing, there's a lot of different ways to use it now. I mean, Google has their own onboard inside of analytics. You've got other third-party tools. You can buy a landing page tool like Unbounce.
Mm-hmm.
In Google's own ads, you're able to put up multiple variants of a different ad, but you're just constantly trying to say, rather than put all of our eggs in one basket, what if we showed different versions of a web page? What if we showed different versions of an ad? And based on whatever you've set the goal to be, see which one wins.
Yeah.
And a lot of these Unbounce type tools will let you run the experiment and will just say, this one looks like the winner.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a massive fan of that. And it strikes me as a massive loss of opportunity that really, I don't see this at all in our industry, especially in tourism. And that's why I was so fascinated to talk to you, is because I don't see people trying to split test anything. They just put stuff out there and hope it works, especially when it comes to pages, when it comes to landing pages.
Yeah, it's a huge mistake because we all have wildly different opinions, and there's also nothing more stifling in an organization when people think that their opinions aren't getting heard. I've got a lot of talented people talking to customers every day. So they've also done their own A/B testing for years of their lives to try to compel people to buy.
Yeah.
So I really like letting some of the salespeople write ad copy.
Yeah.
They've been writing it every day in their emails.
Yeah.
And also, we all get stale. It's hard to look at things with beginner's eyes after a point. You become blind to stuff. So I just think it's smart to, if you're a small hotel, see what your guests are saying in your TripAdvisor reviews, see how they're describing properties, and just to grab different ad copy from different places and build different versions of things. Between headlines and opening statements and image, that's 3 variants.
Yeah.
Make 3 versions of that and you're already up to 9. So there's just infinite possibilities if you decide to, instead of wanting to be right, let's find out what is right.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, and I think you dropped some gold there, and I don't know if the listeners would have picked up on that. So I'm going to come back to it, which is there are places where you don't have to imagine your copy. You're not just thinking it up out of thin air. You're getting your copy from, if you have salespeople, definitely talk to them because they are doing what works. And getting copy out of your customer reviews, testimonials, what the customers are actually saying is also brilliant. You're basically taking that person's thoughts and you're finding more people that are like them, that want that similar experience, which is absolutely brilliant. So
I'm sure you found this, a lot of hoteliers after a while, when you're in year 10 and your world is back of house.
Yeah.
You lose perspective on where your property fits into the global picture.
Oh,
While the customer's traveling the world, the customer has been around, and the customer can more easily say, or a travel agent, whose job it is to curate and understand things, can say, oh, this is how I describe this property. It becomes very difficult for the hotel owner to objectively see themselves after a long period of time. So that's why I think it's really key to go out and read your TripAdvisor or similar reviews, because the customers are going to, eventually they're the ones that are going to define your brand.
Yeah.
So what are they saying?
That's also a really key point, because I'm not going to project this on everybody, but I know for sure, having worked with the hundreds of businesses that I've worked with personally, when I ask the business owner what makes your business unique, the answer that they give, even if they have an immediate answer says, oh, this is what makes us unique.
Yeah.
I have to point out to them 99% of the time, you know what, that's what everyone else says.
Of course it is.
It's like, oh, you think that's unique, but it's not. I had to have that same conversation with my own parents where I said, hey, they're like, oh, we've got a super unique property. I'm like, you guys haven't sampled everything else that's out there as far as
and
competition goes. We're not,
yeah,
and at that time, I said, we're not unique. Here's what we need to do to become more unique. And
yeah,
we're still working on that process every day.
yeah.
So, yeah.
I'm a huge believer in you keep stacking words together until you've created your own category.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's one of my favorite marketing books is the 22 Immutable Laws. You ever
Yeah.
read that one?
Yeah. I read it. Yeah.
It's that big.
Yeah.
When in doubt, create a new category.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's not easy. Everybody wants to be the next Red Bull. You know what Red Bull would create. I mean, at least they defined the category for this other kind of drink, and
Yeah.
therefore could charge a premium for it. The other one they always like to refer to as Cirque du Soleil. He created a new sort of weird category in entertainment, and still is charging a premium for that. So I feel like if you can take a couple known things about your hotel, and then you go, is there something else we can say? Is there something else we could say? And maybe some of it's a stretch to start, and you have to deepen that difference. But once you get about 4 or 5 words deep, sometimes you can say the only. We're the only hotel that is 20 minutes from an airport, adults only, meals included, boutique, unique.
Yeah.
That's our small hotels story. Any one of those things on its own might not be unique, but once you start stacking those descriptive words together, then you can almost get into a new category. And that's where ultimately you want to be. The oddest thing in marketing and trends is people want to just keep grabbing onto trends almost like life preservers.
Mm.
So if foodie tourism is it, we do that too.
Yeah.
You know, if couples, we do that too. But you just have to be very careful as opposed to saying we're the only one that does all these things together. But again, I think it's just a weird thing that happens where people huddle around the same campfire in business thinking that that's safe. It feels more dangerous to say we're the only one that does X.
Yeah, I think it was Seth Godin. I believe it was Seth Godin. I'm totally paraphrasing off the top of my head here, but I believe he said that the most unsafe thing that you can do is try and play it safe, because then you just, from a marketing perspective, you just fit in with everyone else that's out there. And
it just feels safe.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's that innate human thing to point, if it does fail, it's the ability to point the finger and say, but they were all doing it too. So I'm not the
right. At least we all went down.
Yeah, exactly. It's not being bold enough to say, hey, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this my way, or we're going to do this our way. And we're going to accept the responsibility if it does go down, but at least we tried. Yeah,
it's the oddest thing how when these trends emerge, people then want to chase the trend, as opposed to sometimes if everyone's running for a certain exit, if you're the only one going the other way, sometimes it's a better bet, even if it's a longer walk. But yeah, it's just a strange thing that happens. And very often the crazy person in advertising or in the marketing room seems so crazy that nobody wants to listen to them. But again, what's so beautiful now with technology is it doesn't have to be an all or nothing wager.
Yeah.
You know, with these A/B testing tools, if your nephew were to propose some crazy idea to you, you can show that idea 20% of the time. You know,
and we're doing it. I actually had this conversation 2 days ago, I think, with one of my interns, and I said, I'm not here to judge whether this is going to work or not going to work. The numbers are going to judge that. So if you have an idea and I don't like it, we're still going to test it. We'll throw it out there. We'll see how it goes.
It's liberating.
So I'm a massive fan of that. I'm like, hey, I have to accept that other people have other ideas. Let's test those ideas.
It's the only way.
Yeah.
In the old days, it was harder to change things. In the old days, maybe it was cost. I don't know. But it's not, particularly right now where there's so much in doubt.
Mm-hmm.
This is the time to get bold, get a little crazy.
So let's talk, Casey, a little bit. I'd like to explore, as much as you're willing to, I'd like to take a little bit more of a dive down the path of using direct response within tourism and just what you've seen as general trends that do work. So, and I'll talk to ours as well. I'll share what's worked for us at a micro level, but if you're willing to share some of hey, this is what the industry seems to be doing, but then this is what we're kind of doing. I don't know if that's too invasive of ask that kind of question.
I mean, look, I'm not going to lie to you. When it comes to email marketing, We've been a little bit lazy about it. Only in tough times or when things are slower and low season
Hmm.
do we really get more aggressive with list marketing. What we try to do is be as targeted as possible, not overwork lists, and only speak to the audience when we think there's something worth talking about.
Yeah. Um,
That's the
maybe,
only good thing I would say about weird times, like
yeah.
life in the time of Corona, is I think a lot of people do want information.
Hmm.
Like when can I come? Stuff about cancellations, terms and conditions has never been a bigger deal. So what has worked best for us is very segmented lists, A/B testing as well,
Yeah.
not overworking the lists, and fresh lists. You don't want to necessarily be hitting a 50,000 person database that's 10 years old.
Yeah.
And I can tell you the stuff I know doesn't work.
Yeah. Go for it. That's just
Oh,
as important, if not more important.
yeah, I mean, I think the first thing is you need to add value. So don't just communicate to communicate. Don't just be sending out BS newsletters just to like fill up people's inboxes.
Yeah.
Um, I think send all lists are a thing of the past. If you're not segmenting your list, you're just being lazy.
Yeah.
The tools now, whether you're using MailChimp or something similar, the tools are really good. So
Yeah.
it's not that hard to segment your people, segment your databases, clean the databases up a little bit, be smart about your subject lines, run things through spam filters. So you're not getting flagged because you put a bunch of HTML and links and photos in there.
Hmm.
There's just some basic good best practices of which there are a gazillion articles written. Because what you don't want to do is get your domain burned, because
Yeah.
you cause so many complaints. And I just think you don't want to abuse your audience.
Let's pause on that for a second. I'm going to interject and share a method that's been working phenomenally well for us for years, and it still works really well. And you've probably done this, and if you haven't done it, you'll absolutely understand the concept. I call it the concept of the ugly email. So with our business, we have a policy where we don't send out any emails to our list that look like they're marketing advertising emails. There's no splash images. There's no, hey, this is this week's special. There's none of that stuff. If we send out an email, it's got to be information exactly like you said. It's got to be valuable information, or information that that person they're looking for. So when we're sending information out, even if it is, let's say it's a special, let's say that we have some cabins that we want to book that haven't been booked out. We'll send out an email, and we do segment our list. So we'll send this out to our most loyal guests, the ones that have returned quite a few times. And what we'll do is we'll send out an email to them, and we'll say something along the lines of, hey, we've got these openings in the cabins, and we're thinking we'll give it to you. And I wanted to reach out to you personally and see if you were interested in this. And if you book it, just because we know you, we'll give you an extra whatever. We'll give you a free firewood or something like that along with it. But what you put in the email is not near as important as understanding that when you write that email, you have to write it as if you're writing to just that one person, and they have to believe that you're writing to just them. That's the key. And then when they respond, then we'll get a number of responses back. And when they respond, they feel like you were writing to just them. We try and accomplish that with every single email that we send out, is like, we're writing to just that one person.
Yeah.
That, hey, I wanted to reach out to just you. And our response rate on that is ridiculously high. We know when we send out an email, we're going to get a massive response rate, which is amazing. It's not always a cabin rental. Sometimes it's other things, like for instance, for the coronavirus thing, we had to communicate information. We just say, hey, here are our new policies. And I think we did a really, really good job with it. We use that same concept, the ugly email concept. I shouldn't say pretended, because we do reach out to them, but we said, hey, we wanted to talk to you specifically, see how you and your family are doing. And we wanted to let you know that this is what our policy is going to be as far as it pertains to your rental coming up. And I think as a result of that, from those emails, we were proactive sending those emails out and saying, hey, here's what your options are. We had one cancellation out of the hundreds and hundreds of cancellations we've got over the course of the year. We had one person write back from those emails and say, oh yeah, this is a bit of concern, we want to cancel. The rest all were like, oh, we're so glad that you reached out to us and you're concerned about what's going on with us, and thank you for making it easy for us during this time. And I think that really, that concept has saved a lot of the revenue for us as a business. And we do care about our guests. We care about them immensely. Our guests are awesome, but it's a concept that you can use in a lot of different applications.
Yeah, I think there's two concepts there. One, which is the ugly email. I think that somewhere in life, we got convinced that good marketing has to look good.
No, because and sorry, let me define why I said ugly email.
But I know exactly what you mean.
Because you ask yourself, what does the email look like that you get from your best friend? What does the email look like that you get from your mom? What does it look like? Does it look like a big splashy image? No. So send an email that looks like it would come from your mom. Basically was our policy.
Yeah, I mean, and I think it goes beyond just that. I think there are plenty of Craigslist or even Amazon style websites that don't necessarily look the best, but they work.
Yeah.
You know, so I think sometimes people confuse aesthetics with basically form over function. In the end, it's what works. What works. And sometimes ugly does work.
Yeah.
And two, in any direct response, anything, optimal is one-to-one. I mean, if you can hand email your database, if there is a group of ultra VIPs with whom you should be communicating one-to-one, particularly about something as crucial as a cancellation, you do it.
Yeah.
Short of that, you figure out the best way possible, like you're saying, to fake it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that it's both those are incredibly practical. I'd love to see one of your ugly emails.
Yeah, I can share those with you, share what we got.
Yeah.
And we totally never lie. We never say we're reaching out to just you, but part of it, I mean, if you read it, it almost seems that way. I know that we've done in working with some of the other businesses, let's say there is some kind of special or something. So maybe there's an idea for you or anybody else that's listening. Sometimes we'll send out an email and we make sure that you always, like when you sign off on the email, we used to make the mistake of signing off as, in our case, like the Cozy Cabins team or the group, right? You don't get responses that way. You get responses if you sign off as one individual, just one person. Yeah. And for us, we, where was I going with this? If there is some kind of special or event, actually events, this works really well for events. So let's say you're having an event, usually you'll get your secretary, or in your case, maybe it would be one of your travel agents. You send off an email it is legitimately a pre-email. So it's not to the whole list, but it's to a list of people that have maybe bought before or are previous buyers. And you send off an email to them and say, hey, we're about to put this big announcement out there that we're going to host this event and we're going to be putting tickets out. I know we're going to sell this event out, but I wanted to reach out to you and let you know that you can, I can get you a ticket before we actually advertise the event if you're interested. And then it's signed off by the secretary or somebody that's kind of they're the insider in the organization, but they're not necessarily the CEO or the boss or whatever. We have pre-sold events, pre-sold 80% of events just by sending out that email first. And then we do make the big public announcement and say, hey, now we're hosting this event, blah, 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 and we'll sell the rest of the tickets so that there's legitimacy to what we're saying. But it creates that scarcity and urgency saying you have only until this date before it goes public, and I can get one of these tickets for you before anyone else does.
Love it. It's great.
Anyway, so Casey, with advertising or marketing in the travel industry, especially from a direct response perspective, has there been a general consensus for what you see travelers out there respond to as far as ads? I don't know do you guys run ads at all? Any marketing or ads?
Yeah, tons.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like you do. So yeah.
Yeah, the vast majority of our ad budget is pay-per-click.
Okay.
Yeah.
So is there any general areas that travelers tend to respond to as far as what they're reading or what they're seeing online?
I think insider deals. I think that the nightmare for the whole industry is always being run on price. So it's just like you're mentioning with exclusivity. It's how do you, short of just constantly throwing price, put forth something that makes something feel secret or exclusive.
Yeah.
So usually things are around that. Of course, it's always an additional value add. It's not just coming flat out and saying discount, discount, discount,
Yeah.
but something where it's secret, it's exclusive, where you're going to get more of something.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the things that usually work well for us.
Interesting. What I'll throw out there too from our end is, I'm sure you have some sense of this as well, but as far as direct response ads that work really well for us, and when I say ads, in our case, our primary platforms, if we use them, are Google and Facebook, and Instagram. Actually, throw that in there as well.
Mm-hmm.
Usually the ads that work well are the ones that actually don't talk about the destination really at all. There's photos of the destination, but it actually talks about the emotional experience the person's going to have once they're there. Yeah.
I mean, I guess that's what everybody's looking for. Is I think there's a weird tendency to describe the bricks and mortar, the square meters and such. But ultimately, I think what everybody's trying to figure out is what's the feeling that place is going to bring me. Like if you, it's funny, but don't you guys call yourself cozy cabins or something like that? Yeah. I mean, when I think about cabins and mountains, a lot of people, I want to feel cozy. I have this notion of being, some sort of blanket and fireplace and my family and the fire's crackling. So it's always this feeling, and there's a huge wheel of emotions. I think that sometimes we get a little bit lazy about all mentioning the same feelings, romantic.
Yeah.
So,
well, here's another
unique
point.
and looking those up. Like what are the feelings you can expect to feel on this vacation or at this property or in this moment? Or
And
what are
exactly where we got those from is exactly what you said. We actually took those from our testimonials. Our testimonials become our ads. Our reviews become our ads. The other thing that other individuals don't necessarily always do is we actually will hit on fears as well. We'll address the consumer's fears. So for us, we primarily target moms because we go after families. That's our bread and butter. Okay. And we will talk about how they don't need to stress over where their kids are because they don't have to worry about the fact that they're packed in with 1,000 other people, or there's crowds, or there's areas where they can't see their kids. We'll talk about the fact that they can unwind with a glass of wine, whatever. But we definitely hit on the kid thing a lot, where they say, hey, because we took those from the testimonials. Oh, we love not having to worry about our kids at this place. Yeah. You're not going to have to worry about who your neighbors are because you don't have any neighbors. So there's a number of things where we definitely address the fears as well.
That's funny you mentioned that. We mentioned that a ton in our sales pitch. Basically saving time and stress. Yeah. We're not necessarily going to save you tons of money. There's a gazillion websites for discount everything, but saving time and stress and worrying about making a mistake. So a lot of people worry. That's the problem of the infinite choice now. Is infinite choices, infinite opportunities to screw it up. But I do think, that the ultimate in direct response is the infomercial. Yeah. And every infomercial says, "Does your neck hurt from sit-ups?" Yeah. You have to establish the problem out of the gate. Exactly. And I think in some of these cases, it's what are these fears regarding your trip? Yeah. And one of the massive ones, particularly for the younger crowd, is fear of missing out. So how do you make it very clear that you can do all this here? You don't need to worry about X, Y, Z. But I do think there's a weird, taboo about discussing negatives. And I think it's perfectly fine, particularly right now when travelers have a lot of worries on their mind, to say, here's probably the things you're thinking about, and here's how we solve that.
So bringing that up, because obviously what I'm getting out of this conversation is that you and I both, there's a certain way that we approach marketing, and all we've said is, let's not let our own opinions get in the way. Let's go out to the market and just test a million different things and find out what the market's biting on. And what I'm hearing from this, and this is my experience, is that what the market bites on is not what the traditional industry approach is to marketing. Is that your finding
completely.
yeah.
There's some old Hollywood producer said, the one thing I learned after 30 years in this business is nobody knows nothing.
Yeah.
I think it's absolutely true. I think a lot of fancy ad agencies and consultants like to come across as uber confident, but I think nobody knows nothing.
Yeah.
And I think it's even harder when you're the owner who feels vested of, no, our clients come back for our mattresses. That's what all right, prove it.
Yeah.
Prove it. Write that ad copy, make that landing page. I just think it's so silly at this juncture when the data and the tools are so good to have silly arguments. Test every idea. And there is such a wellspring of ideas out there between competitors, other destinations, reading reviews on TripAdvisor. Go find what works. Somewhere, if you're a hotelier, there's some other hotelier like yours somewhere else in the world who's kicking your butt. What are they doing differently?
Yeah, absolutely.
Success leaves clues. You know, so
Okay.
we've emulated stuff all the time and across industries.
Yeah.
Like, oh, that's clever. Let's try it. I had a conversation an hour ago about that. Do you know the crazy egg guys? You know, Neil Patel and Quick Sprout.
Yeah.
Neil Patel's partner was Avinash. He's the one that wrote some of their software.
Yeah.
And he sent out a newsletter today that I thought was great. It said, never let a crisis go to waste. Great deals.
Yeah.
You know, now that initially you're like, ugh, that's a little bit jarring. It's also clever. It cuts through the noise. Got me to read it.
Yeah. No, Neil Patel, I follow a bunch of his stuff as much as I can. I mean, there's a lot of guys out there that are brilliant right now. It sounds also to me like you and I'm not going to say that we're the only ones by any means, but we very much follow a lot of what the marketing trends are online, a lot of the online marketers and online direct response marketers, which comes out of the brilliant old direct response marketers. So talking about copywriting, giving reference to, like you said, Gary Halbert or Dan Kennedy, those guys are brilliant. I follow both their stuff. But I think there's been this, especially in the luxury space. Oh, I've definitely seen this in the luxury space. There's this like poo-pooing of that kind of marketing. They're like, oh, no. We'll show an ad with someone walking on the sandy beach, and that will encompass what we do. Or we'll show a plate of the wonderful food that we have, and that's what does it. I'm like, you know, not to push away the emotions of a human. It's not like the luxury client's not human. They're human. They might have different thoughts, different feelings in some capacity, but they still have emotions and thoughts and feelings. Why not find out what those are so you can serve them better?
Yeah. I mean, I think what happens is people confuse themselves for luxury brands like Rolex or whatever that are brands that are fiercely protecting that brand. And, you know, I get that if you're an ad agent trying to support the brand of Four Seasons or whatever. But if you're a boutique hotelier, you got to do what works.
Yeah.
You know, and there's only one way to find out. And I don't necessarily think you're going to do any lifelong damage to some brand with an A/B test. And
that's true. There's a lot more liberty on the low end. And when I say sorry, I shouldn't say the low end. On the small side, that's something that I love having our resort as a guinea pig, because we get a decent amount of traffic, but compared to the Four Seasons, it's nothing. So, and I know we can recover from if I do make a mistake. I'm like, that's okay. We figured out the best works, so we can recover from it.
You don't have brand rules to follow, but you know, I think the mistake that a lot of people make when they look at some of these big brands is they assume that they're direct response, but they're not. They're heavily sold through value-added resellers. So the marketing and the heavy lifting on a lot of that stuff is being done by somebody further down the supply chain.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're putting out stodgy, boring ads to support a brand, but the people out there selling it are going to sell it with their twist, and you bet they're going to use emotion and other things to describe.
Yeah.
Because the Four Seasons in Costa Rica is very different than the multiple Four Seasons in Hawaii or Mexico.
Yeah.
So you're going to use different words to describe them. You know, I think there are boring middle of the road brands like Marriott.
Yeah.
Apologies to Marriott. Okay. That eventually it's more about your points and knowing that I can use my business travel points to travel somewhere safe somewhere else. It's almost like a cruise ship parked abroad or something. But I think those brands ultimately are going to struggle in the long run. And that's why the ultimate boutique brands would be the individual homes of an Airbnb, which of course is the bane of the existence of every small hotelier. But I think if the small hotelier can really triple down on their uniqueness and their tie to the local flavor, the things that people think they want from an Airbnb, while at the same time addressing some of the fears that you're not necessarily going to be able to address at an independent rental. This is the challenge for small business marketers. And that's why to emulate big business marketers as a small business, I think is a mistake. You got to think more like the Oakland A's than the New York Yankees.
Yeah, that's a really, it's a good concept. Because even in that case, the Oakland A's have a much stronger direct response marketing plan than the Yankees do.
Because they got it.
Yeah, exactly.
No, got less budget to work with.
Yeah.
That's why whenever I hear anything that's not direct response, or whenever I hear any sort of marketing consultant try to woo me with terms of branding, to me that translates to don't expect it to work.
Well, it translates to we're not going to measure this, so you can't hold us accountable.
That's it. That's, to me, that's what branding is. Branding is, I have no way of telling you if this worked.
Yeah.
And I don't have time for that. I want to know it works. I need some sort of one-to-one response, even if that's a pre-response, even if that's just open rate, I need something to know, because otherwise, but if you're saying let's go brand, I need to know that your branding effort beat the other branding effort somehow.
Yeah. So you still have to have some form of
something
measurement.
Download to the app. I don't care. Something.
Just before, and I'm not sure exactly how you feel in this, but just before readers assume that we're riffing on brand and saying branding is a bad thing, let me clarify and say, I think branding is brilliant, and that's the foundation to how you're going to market from that point forward. So I think there's definitely, there's a space where you need to think about branding because it dictates everything else. I don't know how you feel about that though.
Well, look, I mean, it depends. I'm using branding in the terms of when a marketer comes in and says that's branding, right? Versus like, well, let's define our brand. Does the brand have values? Does the brand have a personality? Does the brand have a voice? If this brand were a human being, would I want to hang out with them? You know, I think it's important to think about any business in terms of like, I was gonna name a different one, but I think there's, you need to have a clear idea of the personality of the brand and the other things that brand would like, because then you can kind of get your head in the mind of what else do we think our customers like? I bet you at your cozy cabins, after a while, you know how they dress and the kind of food they eat and the other brands they might like. Yeah. And that gives you some clues there of where else they might hang out, where you can go find them as a marketer.
Yeah. I mean, that helps us build our profiles. If we do target them on Facebook, for instance, we target those things. We say, what are their interests? And it would surprise you how 90% of the things that we put in that list have nothing to do with nature or cabins or any of those things. There's all the other things that we see that we know who that guest is. We know what their interests are. We know what they're into. So, yeah.
And I think then, you know, you have a personal brand. I might have a personal brand. There are certain brands that don't resonate with me because I don't feel like it jives with me. And there's interests, there's activities. And I think the most important are your values and your beliefs. And if you feel like that just doesn't, for some reason, I am repulsed by BMW. For some reason, that brand repulses me. I think of it as like the car for jerks and lawyers. Apologies to jerks and lawyers out there. There's something about BMWs, at least in Latin America, that I see that car roll by and I get the ick. I could have a gazillion dollars and I would never want to buy one of those things.
Because it associates you with that tribe of people.
Whether that's true or not, that's just that's my perception of that brand. And so I think it's important to think about, and again, I'm ascribing certain values to the people that I think like that brand.
Yeah.
So I think it ultimately comes down to like, what are your brand values? What are your brand beliefs? Because in marketing, there are brands like Patagonia. I'm sure there's even better ones that people have a clear idea of that, what that brand represents.
Mm-hmm.
And if they share those beliefs, they're like, I got to go run out and buy me a $300 coat because I believe what that brand represents.
Yeah.
And obviously everyone's chasing Apple because Apple seems to represent, rebellion and art and youth. And brands that have a clear brand identity and values trade at a premium.
Yeah. I'm sure you're familiar with this too, but just for anybody listening, if you want a good talk on what I see as a foundational point of brand, looking at it's getting old now, but Simon Sinek's, I'm gonna probably mispronounce or misassociate what the title of this talk is, but I believe it's something along the lines of "Start with Why."
Yeah, that's it. And that's what I was scratching around.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think it's any different than your friends, right? Which is, there's friendship through common experience, but the most powerful bonds are with people with whom you have common beliefs. And when you have a very clear sense of what you think a brand believes in, and you believe in that too, then usually you're a fan for life.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I definitely think in hospitality and definitely in the world of small hotels, when a small property resonates with you, when you're like, I know the feeling of this place, you go there for life. There's people we go there every year for the last 50 years because we have some strong bond and association with that place, how it makes us feel, how the people there also seem to feel. Our boutique hotel, we've got more staff than rooms, and there's definitely a very specific feeling there. I know a lot of it just grew organically, and you either like it or you don't.
I think you're right. A lot of that's going to grow organically, but I do believe as well, this has been true for us the last few years. We've had a lot of conversations lately with what is our culture and what would we like our culture to be, and being very intentional about it. Because as much as our resort has been in business for close to 40 years now, that conversation was never actually officially had with who do we want to actually be as a culture. And then what that does is it allows you to, in some ways, to enhance the things that can and should be enhanced. There's always subtleties in how you do that, but in saying, we could be better in these areas. We have elements of that, and that's part of what defines us as a culture, but we could actually be better. Or there's areas where we say, maybe we should drop this because it's inconsistent with who we are, or it's giving us a negative connotation when we actually step back and look at how we're playing across the big picture. So I think those are important conversations to have, which in my opinion go back to a branding conversation. How are we going to find the culture that we build here? Yeah.
That's it.
Cool. Casey, I know.
Should we wrap her up?
I know they're getting on time. Yeah. So let's wrap it up. Let me ask you one last marketing question, and then let's talk about where people can find you. So when it comes to small boutique resorts, and obviously you started with your family, you guys do you still have that then? Or you still have?
No, we had a small hotel in Panama many years ago.
Yeah.
And we sold that before I returned to Costa Rica in 2012. So we just still operate one property in the northern part of Costa Rica at the beach. It's called Villa Buena
so you do
Onda.
What is it called?
Still operate Villa Buena Onda.
Villa Buena Onda.
Yeah, Buena Onda is like the Costa Rica equivalent of saying good vibes, bro.
Oh, I should know that, but I don't.
Surfer lingo.
Well, so if you're looking for a good property to stay at, in Costa Rica, you can check that one out. But that also means that it infers that, yeah, adults only. So any children that are listening to this podcast.
No kids.
You can't. Yeah. Any 3-year-old.
Unless you rent the whole joint.
Yeah. So is there any last advice that you'd give to boutique operators that are out there? Because that's the majority of the listeners that we've got are in that space. They're operating a space that's a boutique destination or ranch, resort, island, somewhere around the world. Anything?
Yeah.
Your wisdom.
My advice in closing to any small hotel is you got to think like an agency. You got to stop thinking like a hotel. You are a travel agent, whether you like it or not. So if you're going to attempt to have direct bookings, you need to start thinking of your property in the bigger context of your destination. You need to talk to some of your friends who are tour operators and travel agents, and you need to have a little bit of that corporate culture inside your property, where you're saying like, we can't just depend on the whole industry to promote us. And even if you're heavy on B2B marketing, you still have to be a marketer, a promoter, and a seller of your property. You can't just operate.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer of that, obviously, but I think that's very sage advice. So, Casey, where can people find your travel agency, your online travel agency, and maybe the hotel as well? Is there a specific website or something?
Yeah, I mean, overall, we call our organization the NAMU Travel Group. We're best known for our first business, which is Costa Rica Vacations. It's vacationscostarica.com, although we offer all Central America and a little bit of Colombia and Ecuador. And then our 8-room boutique unique adults only property is Villa Buena Onda. That's very close to the Liberia Airport in Guanacaste, Costa Rica.
Okay, that's awesome. We will definitely include those links in the show notes. So wherever you're listening to this, go find the description for this podcast and we'll have those links there so you can check out.
Thank you for having me.
Organizations. Yeah, thanks a lot, Casey. I really appreciate your time. Fascinating guy to talk to, just because, like I said, you don't see a ton of our kind of marketers in the industry. So good to get your input. And I think it's also a validation to say, hey, I know what I'm doing is working, but no one else seems to understand that. So here's one other person that's out there, at least, that's saying, yeah, it's working.
One of my favorite quotes is Peter Thiel says, "Tell me what you believe that no one else believes." And I'll tell you something that it seems that only you and I believe, which is if you're small, avoid the heck out of online booking. I think it's a gigantic missed opportunity to drive your traffic straight to online booking. You need to have conversations with people.
Yeah, that's such a key point. I know we talked about that in a previous conversation, but and to know it's possible, like we don't use any OTAs, and there are reasons for that, but we don't have to use OTAs. We don't have to pay the commissions to them, but you lose a treasure trove of information from your guests if you use OTAs, and that's a really good way of
and you lose the customer. But I think you and I might be the only two small hotel marketers in the world who think avoid your online booking piece. I just think that you got to have conversations with people.
Yeah. Oh, so you were talking, I think I was reading that wrong. I was thinking about the OTA. You're actually talking about just not allowing guests to book directly on the website. Yeah. And we're on the same page.
It's okay to allow it. Yeah, I think it's okay to allow. I just think it's silly to drive people there, particularly if your property is in any way quirky or unique or small. You lose out on so many opportunities to steer a conversation the way it should be steered versus giving customers the tools to sometimes hurt themselves.
Yeah. Totally in agreement with that too. We really want our customers to actually phone in or interact with us before they just click a button and book. There's a lot of benefits to that. Okay. Well,
listen,
Casey, thank you
have
again.
a great weekend.
Yeah, you too, man. Thank you so much for your time. And like I said before, if you want to find any of what Casey's working on, we're going to leave some links in the show notes below. So check those out.
Thank you. Come visit.
Yeah, cheers, man.
See ya.
All right.
Stay in touch, man. We'd love to trade